Okay, so last time we were talking about how to find the equilibrium. That clearly doesn't do anything, but you went through the process. Or if you write down an equation for supply, you write down an equation for demand, then you can just solve them together, because the whole idea is that that point where they intersect is the point where the supply relationship is true at the same time that the demand relationship is true, which just means that you're looking for solving two equations, two unknowns. Let's do another quick example of that. Let's say we got a supply. Let's see, we got price is 2 plus 3 times QS, and then we have demand is price equals 20 minus 3 QD. All right, so we can solve these two together. So first thing we're going to do is we can say, hey, this is not price. We're looking for the intersection. We need P star, which is the equilibrium price. And that's not QS and QD, because at equilibrium, those are the same thing. We need Q star. We get P star equals 2 plus 3 Q star. And we get P star equals 20 minus 3 Q star. All right, then two equations, two unknowns. We got P star, we got P star. If math tells us anything, it's that these two things are going to be equal to each other. So we have one P star here, which is 2 plus 3 Q star. Just right, these two things are equal, so these two things are equal. That's going to be equal to this P star, which is 20 minus 3 Q star. Okay. Now we have one equation, one unknown. This is just some pretty basic algebra, so we can add 3 Q star to both sides. Now we get 2 plus 6 Q star is 20. We can subtract 2 from both sides. We get 6 Q star is 18. And then we can divide by 6 to get that Q star is 3. We have an equilibrium quantity of 3. We're going to draw out our supply and demand. This is our equilibrium point. Here's our Q star, which is 3. We can then figure out what the P star is by just plugging that back in, which we can just know by looking at this, right? Because we're saying here, hey, what's the price that you get if you plug 3 into supply, or if you plug 3 into demand? Should be the same number. So we get P star is, let's do supply, 2 plus 3 times 3, which is going to be 2 plus 9, or 11. We should get the same answer if we do demand. We get P star is 20 minus 3 times our quantity of 3, which is 20 minus 9, which is 11. Here. Price of 11. There's our equilibrium right there. So this sort of leads us to another question, right? So we didn't start here, right? I just told you how to solve for this equilibrium. I guess any questions about the equilibrium stuff again? We didn't start here, right? The way that I talked about getting to this point was that we started with the price being away from this point, and we sort of floated in this direction. And so we should also probably figure out, how do we deal with all this stuff? How do we work with this model if we're not at that equilibrium price? Right? What are we going to do? So we can ask, what's going to happen if we are away from equilibrium, right? Because we're not going to be at equilibrium all the time, as you know, because you were just all not at equilibrium for a little while. So there's a bunch of reasons why you might be not at equilibrium. It could just be that you haven't gotten there yet, right? It takes time to adjust towards the equilibrium as people realize that there are opportunities left to exploit, and they exploit them. There could be something that literally does not allow you to reach the equilibrium. You could have some law that says the price must be at a certain level, or that the quantity must be at a certain level, and this could keep you away from that equilibrium point. So we want to know what's going to happen in these situations. Thankfully, it turns out to be pretty straightforward. So let's go back to these supply and demand curves from earlier, right? And we're going to ask ourselves, what happens if we are not at the equilibrium price, but instead have enforced a price of 16? Let's very briefly figure out what the equilibrium price is again. it is 20. So we have the price of 20. Oh, and what was the quantity? It was 5. We have a law passed that says, hey, 20 is too expensive. We want to give people a little bit of a break. So we're going to make sure that the price is not going to go any higher than 5. Higher than 16. That's the highest you are allowed to charge. Anything above that is illegal. So we can figure out, well, what's going to happen in this. The next thing that we're going to do is something we've actually already done, right? Because when I was going through the logic of how we get to that equilibrium, I said, well, what if we're away from the price? Well, we just got to figure out, well, what does that new price have to do? That price is 16. What does it have to do with supply? What does it have to do with demand? We can do that by just plugging it in. How do we plug it in? Well, we're talking about lines here. There's that price of 16 line, right? Our equation here is price equals 16. That is an equation. I'm going to look for where that line intersects with supply, right here, and demand. Always looking for where lines intersect. Every answer on the graph in this course is where 2 lines intersect. Almost. So, what quantities do those intersect at? I can tell you, this is going to be QS, right? That's the quantity supply, because that's what you get if you plug a price into the supply curve. You get the quantity supplied. That's the whole point of the supply curve. This is going to be the quantity demanded, because that's exactly what you get when you plug price into a demand curve. You get the quantity demanded. That's the whole point of the demand curve. So now we just got to figure out, what are these two things, right? We have an excess demand. We know it's an excess demand because quantity demand is bigger than quantity supply. There's people running around trying to buy the thing, they can't find it. But how big is it? Well, we've got demand, we've got supply. We just need to plug in our price value. So let's do demand first. So we got price is 30 minus 2 QD. I want to see where that intersects with the price of 16. So I just plug in 16 with the price. That's one equation, one unknown. We can solve that. We can move this 2QD over there. We can move that 16 over there. We get 2QD equals 14. Divide by 2. We get QD is 7. So at a price of 16, people are going to want to buy 7 units. Quick gut check. Any thoughts? How can I check that I haven't done something egregiously wrong in this calculation? What was that? Yeah, I can plug it back in, make sure that I get 16. That's a good idea, right? We can say, okay, what's 30 minus 2 times 7? 30 minus 14 is 16. Good. Excellent. Another way we can check and make sure that we're not doing something wrong, look at the graph. So price has just gone down, which should mean that people want to buy more of the thing. So the quantity that we find should be higher than the equilibrium quantity we started with. If it's not, we did something wrong. Similarly, our quantity supply should be lower. Let's do that and make sure that we get that right too. So we get supply of price is 15 plus QS. 16 equals 15 plus QS, just plugging in the price of 16 that we got. So we got a quantity supplied of 1, which is indeed lower than the 5 that we started with. So how much excess demand is there? How many units are people out there trying to buy but not able to find anything? Our excess demand is our quantity demanded minus our quantity supplied, or 7 minus 1, which is 6. Right? People are out there trying to find 6 units but cannot find it. So we're going to get a number of different ways in which this is going to end up being important. You can imagine why we might be interested in doing all this. For one, it can show us, okay, if the price is away from equilibrium, how much of a problem is it going to be? Right? Is it going to be, we got a lot of people out there sort of not finding what they need or not able to sell, or is it just going to be a tiny little problem? It's also going to help us figure out, well, what happens if you start messing with prices, right? If you take the price and you make it be something other than the equilibrium, what are you going to see, right? How much difference is there going to be in the market? Third, we can see what's actually going to happen here. What actual quantity is going to get traded in this market where the price has been pushed lower? Well, it's not going to be the 7. It's not gonna be the 5, it's gonna be the 1, right? Because after that first unit gets sold, people are like, hey, price is 16, I wanna buy a second unit. And everybody that's on the supply side says, no, that's above my cost. So I'm not gonna bother making you a second unit, you get 1 unit exactly. Whichever side ends first, whichever one's lower, that's the quantity that you actually end up with. So even if the price is too high, we can do all this again with a high price. Let's say that we got 20. Now let's say we got a price of 22. Right? We can do the exact same thing. Here's our price of 22. What's our quantity supplied going to be? What's our quantity demand going to be? Or swap those. So we got our demand, which is 22, is 30 minus 2 QD. So we got 2 QD is 8. QD is 4. That's it right over there. That's our 4. How much quantity supplied? We get that from our supply curve. So we got 22 is 15 plus QS. QS is 7. I just have to do the same here. So if the price is too high, we now have an excess supply, right? Here's our quantity supplied at 7. Here's our quantity demanded at 4. There's 3 units out there that people are trying to sell at this high price, but they can't find a buyer. The amount of excess supply at the price of 22 is QS minus QD, which is 7 minus 4, or 3. And the actual quantity that gets traded would be the 4, right? Because at that point, 4 people buy units, or 4 units get sold to somebody. The sellers are out there saying, hey, I want to sell you a 5th unit. And everyone says, no, it's not worth it to me. I'm not going to do that. So whoever has the lower number sort of has the power there. They get to stop first. A place where this is going to come back, by the way, and we'll discuss this a little bit later, is when you're talking about, how much effect do certain policies have that sort of mess with prices. One that you probably heard a lot about, minimum wage, right? That's an example of a thing that's setting the price. Minimum wage says, hey, you are not allowed to charge a price for your work that is below a certain amount. So what this model would suggest, if the labor market's competitive, you're going to get an excess supply. You're going to have more people who are wanting to work than can find work, which is sort of that's the prediction that you hear, right? And what does that translate to? That translates to people who are wanting to work, can't find work, which is unemployment. Then the question is, okay, well, that's the prediction. Is it a big difference or is it a tiny difference, right? And figuring that out is going to be important, because if it's a big difference, that means that you're going to end up with a lot of people out of work. If it's a tiny difference, then you're going to raise wages, but not put a whole lot of people out of work. And that's going to be pretty important for thinking about whether raising the minimum wage is a good idea. You got to know that before you can figure it out.